Hey, my name is Chris Brennan, and this is your year ahead horoscope forecast for Gemini for the entire year of 2024. All right, so let's jump right into it, Gemini. So here's the planetary movements calendar that shows where the planets will start at the beginning of the year and where they will end up. And here are the main keywords for you this year, which are friends, children, self, career, health, and beliefs. So those are the main themes that I think you're going to encounter and focus on this year. And I'm going to spend the rest of this video breaking down why that is and what transits are going to correlate with that and sort of expanding on it over the course of the next year. All right, so let's start first with the eclipses. So there's going to be eclipses this year in the signs of Aries and the sign of Libra, which is your fifth house of children, creativity, leisure, and sex and sexuality, your fifth house, which is Libra, and the 11th house, which represents friends and groups and alliances in your life. It's the house of friends, basically. So eclipses represent major endings and major beginnings in this area of your life. And sometimes it can represent very important events that are happening where there's changes that are happening in these two distinct areas of your life. Sometimes these can be interconnected, but other times it just represents a singular set of events that are taking place in that specific area. All right, so some of these changes already started last year in 2023 when these eclipses first started taking place in this sector of your chart. So when it comes to the fifth house, which is Libra, sometimes eclipses can represent, if you don't have children, it can represent a period where you have children or the topic of children somehow becomes more important to you for some reason, whether your children or somebody else's. In other instances, if you already have children, it can represent a new chapter in your child's life or in terms of your relationship with them for some reason. The fifth house also represents creativity. So if some of you may find yourself taking up a new hobby or a new creative activity, whether it's artistic or whether it's just the things you do in order to have fun and sort of like blow off steam, while sometimes those can seem unimportant, in other times in our life, they can actually be very important and enriching. And for you, it's going to be more of a focus this year. The fifth house also relates to sex and sexuality, so it may be some new chapter in your life when it comes to this, or in terms of a new relationship that's either starting or ending that has a major impact on your life and that the way that you express yourself in that area as well. So that is the fifth house. The 11th house represents friends and groups and alliances. And when you have eclipses taking place in this area, usually it either means new major friendships that are starting or starting a new social activity or joining a club, because the 11th house also represents alliances. Other times with eclipses taking place in this area, it can represent the end of a friendship, especially if a friendship has kind of like run its course and it's reached the end of its life cycle or the end of its sort of usefulness for either you or your friend. Sometimes this can represent a period where you sort of close down that chapter of your life when it comes to friends, which then in turn will free you up and make you more available to form other friendships in the future, since each ending also represents a new beginning. So those are the eclipses that are taking place in that sector of your chart this year. The next section that I wanted to focus on was this Saturn-Neptune conjunction in transit in your 10th house of career and overall life direction. So my primary keyword for this year is nebulous challenges regarding career and life direction, largely because of this, what will happen around June and July especially, is this conjunction between Saturn and Neptune, where Saturn represents what's real versus Neptune usually represents that which is imaginary or illusory. And there's some sort of tension between those two that's taking place at this time in your 10th house of career. So this is tied in with a broader 3-year transit of Saturn through your 10th house of career that just started last year in March of 2023. And Saturn usually represents surmountable difficulties and periods of consolidation or running into obstacles when it comes to one's career and overall life direction. So for some of you, this may represent leaving a job or leaving a line of work that you'd been working on for a while. In other instances, it can represent a period of trying to be more realistic about what your career and life goals are, especially if that comes into tension or conflict with that area. If you've been being a little bit more idealistic about that area of your life over the course of the past decade, especially since Neptune's been transiting through Pisces for quite a while now. But this is really going to come into focus, especially not just in the June-July timeframe when Saturn and Neptune conjoin each other, but especially around September, because we're going to get an eclipse in September in your 10th house of career, and that's going to represent the beginning of a new series of major beginnings and major endings when it comes to your career and overall life direction. So that's similar to the eclipses that were taking place that I mentioned earlier in your 5th and 11th house, but those eclipses were a continuation of a series from 2023, whereas this Pisces eclipse is the start of a new series that's going to highlight that sector of your chart of your public life and your overall life direction over the course of the next year and a half. So some major changes are coming, and I think that's really going to highlight the area of your career and overall life direction starting in September, but then also carrying into next year into 2025. All right, so those are some of the things that you'll be focused on in terms of that. The next section I want to focus on is some of the really positive transits that you're having this year that are going to be the things to look forward to the most and to be the most hopeful for. So one of them is transiting Jupiter has been going through your 12th house starting in mid-2023, but in the first half of 2024, this is going to reach a critical turning point where my primary keyword for it is an expansion or unexpected growth and opportunities with respect to two topics in particular. One is enemies or people that you don't get along with, and the second is areas of mental health and how you deal with your mental health. So this is going to be actually, even though those sound like challenging areas, a very positive period of growth and expansion when it comes to those topics, especially in the first half of 2024. So the 12th house, while the 11th house that I was talking about earlier represents friends and people that help you or that you get along with, the 12th house usually represents the opposite, which is people that you don't get along with, or in some extreme cases that can mean enemies, like people that outright work against you or undermine you in some way. With Jupiter transiting through your 12th house, though, this year in the first part, there's going to be some opportunities to reconcile with some of these enemies or to smooth things over a little bit more than had occurred earlier prior to this transit beginning last year. So in particular, I think in May, there's going to be the potential for unexpected periods of success when it comes to people that you don't get along with, especially if there's some sort of conflict or battles that you've had with them up to this point. This transit of Jupiter conjoining Uranus in your 12th house of enemies in May may represent you being successful or overcoming them in some way, especially if there's something where you've been having to defend yourself or fight against something that's been challenging or difficult when it comes to that area of your life. So that's one area. Another area that the 12th house has to do with sometimes isolation and going inward and sort of trying to help our internal mental state. And with transiting Jupiter going through your 12th house, this can be a good time for self-reflection and to come to some new realizations about who you are and what you're doing here that are sort of going to be helpful for you in terms of your mental state and in terms of mental growth. So this can be a good year, for example, to start seeing a therapist and to build a relationship with a therapist or some other sort of mental health advocate that can help you sort of guide you in that internal journey and help you to make progress and reach new heights or new realizations during the course of especially the first half of this year. So definitely take advantage of that opportunity. All right. So the other area that's sort of related, but it's distinct in terms of the timing, in terms of one of the most positive transits that's going to happen this year, is that starting in June, Jupiter is going to move into your first house of self and mind and body. So this should represent a period of expansion of self and understanding who you are. And it's interesting that this will follow in the second half of the year, immediately after some of the opportunities and some of the work that you do in the first half of the year, which I think relates to that mental health piece that we're finding earlier, that we were talking about earlier, although it also may relate to the like finally getting a hold of and finally smoothing over some things with people who were undermining you. I forgot to mention the 12th also represents ways sometimes in which we undermine ourselves, and sometimes learning and coming to realizations about ways in which we're doing that. But once we have those realizations, it can then begin a period of growth once you overcome that and learn to stop doing it, so you no longer do it anymore. So that may be part of what's happening here in the second half of the year, is that you overcome some of that stuff in the 12th house in the first half of the year, and it just frees you up to do so much else in terms of learning more about yourself, learning more about your mind, but also having a period where things are going relatively well in terms of your body and your physical health. Can be an indication of having a Jupiter transit through the first house. So sometimes people they start new workout routines, or they start focusing on ways that they can improve their body, and they start taking advantage of opportunities to do that. Sometimes they have a change of appearance, or they do some sort of physical change that changes how they appear to the world, and projects a much more optimistic and sort of like positive vibe, which in turn then has this feedback effect where then other people treat you in a way that's more positive as well, which can then in turn sort of like improve your sense of self. So this transit is lasting for the entire second half of the year. It's very positive. Having Jupiter go into your rising sign and just represents luck, opportunities for growth, and expansion in general over the course of the second half of 2024 and going into 2025. So that's probably the most positive transit that you're happening this year, is that Jupiter, the planet of luck and abundance, is going into your sign. All right, so moving into other areas, there is going to be a Mars retrograde later in the year, and this is going to take place going through your third house and your second house. So my primary keywords for this are tensions surrounding siblings, neighbors, and finances. So the third house is the one that represents siblings, neighbors, communication. Sometimes it can represent your neighborhood or your city, basically your immediate environment. And for some reason, with Mars slowing down and stationing retrograde there's an extended period of irritation. So sometimes with third house transits, especially Mars transit, it can indicate having a conflict that has to do with communication. So one of the things that you can do to be proactive about this is be careful with how you communicate with people, especially if you find yourself more irritable and more prone to sort of like flying off the handle at these times. Try not to go too far, because sometimes during Mars transits, we can initiate like a verbal like conflict with somebody that we think will pass by and not be a big deal, but it can end up having much more far-ranging implications, or it can last and lead to a longer term conflict than we might expect at first. So careful with communications. If you have siblings, this can pertain to siblings and your relationship with them, so be careful with that, especially period of the potential for like strife or separations. The third house can also represent extended family as well as neighbors. So people that live in your like immediate neighborhood and the potential for conflicts with them. Mars is also going to retrograde back into your second house, though, which is the place of finances. And sometimes this can indicate tensions surrounding financial matters, potentials for running into challenging issues surrounding that, or having other Mars related sort of like irritations that make you feel very frustrated or very even angry surrounding financial matters at this time. So I would just recommend exercising caution when it comes to both of those topics this year, especially in terms of doing anything that you initiate yourself out of irritability or anger, and to try to do things that are a little bit more restrained or a little bit more calm and collected. And if you cultivate that, then you should be able to navigate and avoid some of the worst potential scenarios when it comes to those topics. All right. Let's see. The final transit that I wanted to mention this year is Pluto is departing from Capricorn, your 8th house, and it's moving into Aquarius, your 9th house of travel, religion, beliefs, philosophy, foreign places. And it's going to begin a 20-year period, which should broadly coincide with transformative experiences surrounding travel, that which is foreign to you, as well as your beliefs and your personal philosophy. So we got a little bit of a preview of this transit already last year in 2023 when Pluto first dipped into Aquarius. But this year, by the end of 2024, Pluto will firmly move into Aquarius, where it will stay for the next 2 decades. So for most people, this represents a period of profound transformative experiences that come as a result of being exposed to things that are different than your starting point. So sometimes this means being exposed to different cultures or different peoples as a result of travel or as a result of foreign cultures that open up your eyes to different ways of living. In other instances, the 9th house and transits like this can represent going into a period where you're exposed to new belief systems, and new ways of thinking about the world, which can even be like political beliefs, but it can also represent religious beliefs. So I've seen people go through complete sort of like religious transformations or transformations with respect to their politics or their political beliefs during this time. So this can be ultimately a positive transit, but you should try to exercise restraint in terms of there can be a tendency to go overboard or to go too far and to pick up something that's new, but then as like a new, let's say a new convert to something, to take it a little bit further and to lack moderation in terms of your adoption of that thing. So everybody, likes getting into something new and then getting deep into it and researching it heavily, but just try not to go too far, because sometimes if you go too far when it comes to a new belief or a new worldview, it can lead to a sort of extremism that can be a little bit much. So try to take it easy if you can. And if you do that, I think you'll experience the more positive manifestations of this transit, which can be very positive transformations, where you're leaving your old sort of beliefs and worldview behind, and you're moving into a period where your beliefs become quite different than what you had before. So, so that's the last transit that I wanted to mention, and that transit will be ongoing over the course of the next 20 years. But this year, it's important to pay attention to the early phases of it, because it'll give you a preview of what's to come over the next 2 decades. All right, I think that's it in terms of the major transits that I wanted to mention this year. Here's the Mars retrograde dates. Here are the primary transits that I mentioned here in this horoscope. And here are some of the key dates for those watching the video version on YouTube that correlate with some of the different transits that I mentioned during the course of this horoscope. So I think that's it for this horoscope for 2024. For a more detailed breakdown of the transits this year, check out my 2024 year ahead astrology forecast on YouTube, which you can find on my YouTube channel. Or if you're looking for good dates this year to do different things over the course of 2024, I recently released a report where I went through each of the next 12 months and I highlighted the most fortunate and auspicious dates for doing different types of ventures or starting new things using the principles of electional astrology. So I'm currently running a 15% off New Year's sale on that report, and you can get it at theastrologypodcast.com/2024 report. All right. Thanks for watching this horoscope. Good luck next year. Let me know in the YouTube comments how you're doing and what you're excited about in the coming year of 2024. And otherwise, I'll be back again next year to do the horoscopes again 1 year from now. So good luck. Have a great year, and I'll see you again next year. All right. If you appreciate the work I'm doing here on the podcast and you'd like to find a way to support it, then consider becoming a patron through my page on patreon.com. In exchange, you'll get access to some great subscriber benefits. You can find out more information at patreon.com/astrologypodcast. Shout out to our sponsor for this episode, which is the Chani app, the #1 astrology app for self-discovery, mindfulness, and healing. You can download it on the Apple App Store or on Google Play, or for more information, visit app.chani.com. Special thanks to all the patrons that helped to support the production of this episode of the podcast through our page on patreon.com. In particular, shout out to the patrons on our producers tier, including patrons Christy Moe, Ariana Amour, Mandy Ray, Angelique Nambo, Issa Sabah, Jake Otero, Jeannie Marie Kaplan, and Melissa Delano. If you're looking for a reliable astrologer to get an astrological consultation with, then we have a new list of astrologers on the podcast website that we recommend for readings. Find out more information at theastrologypodcast.com/consultations. The astrology software that we use and recommend here on the podcast is called SolarFire for Windows, which is available for the PC at alabe.com. Use the promo code AP15 to get a 15% discount. For Mac users, we recommend a software program called AstroGold for Mac OS. You can find out more information at astrogold.io, and you can use the promo code AstroPodcast15 to get a 15% discount. If you're really looking to expand your studies of astrology, then I would recommend my Hellenistic Astrology course, which is an online course on ancient astrology, where I take people through basic concepts up through intermediate and advanced techniques for reading birth charts. You can find out more information at courses.theastrologyschool.com. And finally, thanks to our sponsors, including the Mountain Astrologer magazine, which is a quarterly astrology magazine, which you can read in print or online at mountainastrologer.com. And the Northwest Astrological Conference, which is happening both in person and online, May 23rd through the 27th, 2024. You can find out more information at norwac.net.